Welcome to the 517th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome and thanks for listening. Well, this is going to be a race report that is very applicable to life, so hang in. Someone told me that I spend a lot of time going around the barn, but I finally get back to the point, so I will get back to the point. This past weekend was the Skunk Ape 50-mile and 100-mile ultra event. I participated along with Michael in the 50-mile event in Ocala, Florida, which is the Santos Trail, part of the Florida Trailway system. Very, very beautiful, but we had one of the hottest days we've had in 2025 this weekend. And I think it's summed up best by a statement that my grandmother used to say: if horses were wishes, beggars would ride. So if you're all old enough to understand what that means, good. If not, I'll explain it as we go. We obviously knew it was going to be hot. The weather app projected 92 degrees on Friday before the race. It didn't get out of the 90s until 8:30 in the evening. So we started the race. It did cool off at about 70, and it was pretty nice in the beginning. We went through some tree-covered area, and most of the course, there was a good 24 of the first 30 miles that was tree-covered, but there was 8 miles in full sun. And I'll talk about it later. Before the race, I have been having this question of what shoes to wear: a zero drop, meaning a very flat ultra type shoe, or a Hoka shoe. I wore the Hoka in the past and got blisters under my toenails and thought maybe I wouldn't wear those, but my ultras were a little bit worn, so I thought I got better response out of the Hoka. My goal was to try to run this at a little faster pace, if possibly, to try to see how long I could maintain a faster pace, knowing full well that the heat was going to catch up and slow us down. But I had a goal to go out and then come back maybe a couple miles per hour or a couple minute miles slower than I went out. For instance, we were hoping to maintain a 13-minute mile pace on the way out and a 15-minute mile pace on the way back. To my knowledge, the course was 29 miles out and 22 miles back. The course 51, not 50. That's okay, bonus mile. And then there was this section on the way out called the berm, which is a sandy, you think about a 2-lane highway that's full of sand, best beach sand you've ever seen, or even just think Sahara Desert. That was this long, straight stretch on the way out, but you didn't have to go through that on the way back. I decided to wear the Hoka shoes, and I decided to pre-tape because the Hokas wore on the inside of my big toes, and I didn't want to get a blister there, so I decided to pre-tape there, and I decided to pre-tape over my toenails. So over my first, second, and third and fourth toes on both sides. At 6 miles in, I could feel my second toes not liking the tape, so I actually stopped at the first aid station, which is about 6.5 miles into the race, pulled off my socks, pulled off that tape on my little toes, keeping the tape on my big toes, thinking I was protecting because I know those Hoka shoes were going to rub on my big toes. I also had pre-lubed with some salty britches, which have served me well in the past. So I did everything in my power, I thought, wearing toe socks to kind of protect my feet on a hot day, including running through the sand, sugar sand, deep sugar sand. So we started out again, had a nutrition plan that I wanted to test out. We had a run walks plan that we wanted to test out. I wanted to run 2 minutes, walk 30 seconds, try to keep my heart rate down, but being able to push the pace a little bit in that 2-minute run section. Because it was hot, had to carry extra fluid, so carried a bladder on in a running vest of 1.8 liters of water, and then had 2 flasks in the front, 14 ounces each, that I put my electrolyte solution in. And because we're a little picky when it comes to eating and that plant-based, I just can't do, junky, non-vegan food and things like that. We carried our own food for the 30 miles out, and there was a drop bag for the way in. So food being gels, some plant-based gummy worms, and a layered bar, and then gnarly packs, which is my electrolyte solution. There's little packets that have 200 calories each, that had the vest, so it would have enough to fill the flask up with the gnarly every other aid station, fill the bladder up with water every other aid station. So we're looking about somewhere between 10 and 12 miles doing those fill-up stations. The idea was to maintain as little or take as little time as possible at the aid station. 3 minutes when we didn't have to do the bladder fills because it takes more, take the vest off, fill the water, 3 minutes otherwise. So that was the goal. So wanted to test the shoes, wanted to test the run walk, wanted to test the nutrition, and then had to carry that extra stuff. And really wanted to carry that extra stuff because I will be doing that at Leadville, but I hadn't done it other than the other races this year. So 2 other times I'd carried that vest, but not near the load that we had going out on this one. The vests are nice. The weight is distributed pretty good, but it nevertheless it's probably somewhere around 5 or 6 pounds. So early on, you could kind of feel the heaviness of it, and kind of pull it up when I was doing the walk breaks, just to try to give myself a little break and keep that from becoming an issue. So first aid station, okay, took the tape off, doing the nutrition, taking in the gels, everything seemed to be okay. Had a little bit of a low, maybe wasn't, for before the races started, I had a nut butter and jelly sandwich. So I started eating about an hour. I was taking gels, but was doing some of the liquid hydration mix with the electrolyte and glucose solution early on too. So I was taking in some calories, but I bumped it up a little bit and seemed to get through that, and things were going pretty good. And then we hit the berm. And before the berm there were some, old oak trees, giant oak trees with, the biggest oak trees I've ever seen in Florida, with these big overhanging branches and long. So they've been there a couple hundred years, just gorgeous. And in this area in Ocala, if you've not been there, it's horse country. So there were farms around the area when we were driving up, really, really nice. So it was very, very pleasant. People around, very nice. And as I was running through the woods, a guy came up beside us and said, how you doing? We're doing okay. And I'm not sure where you're from, small talk conversation. And I said, Port Charlotte. And he said, me too. And it's like, what? Here we are in the middle of the woods in Ocala, and this guy says he's from Port Charlotte too. So shout out to Brian Cummings, because Brian also listened to my podcast. He had listened to the podcast with Andy Matthews from the Long Haul. So that was pretty funny to run into somebody, again, in the middle of the woods that not only listened to the podcast, but was from Port Charlotte. So we kept running along, doing pretty good. Was a little slower than I wanted to be early on, but again, the temperature was going up, and we were still really making good pace. So doing really good, 15, 16, 17 miles, hit some sunny areas, up a little bit of a road. You go over a land bridge over the interstate. We could look out over. It's pretty cool for animals to cross, pedestrians to cross, but no cars. So that was cool. On and off the trail, we would cross over the equestrian trails as well. Did not see any horses. And then we turned on to this infamous berm that was every bit as bad as promised. About 5 miles, double lane road, 3 to 7 or 8 inch sand, you would kind of look for places that were leaves occasionally so you didn't sink in so bad, but it was not runnable for me and most of the people that I saw or talked to. So it meant that you were walking. And it, you know, when you go to the beach and you first get on the sand before you get to the hard packed area and you're walking and one foot slides forward and the other foot slides back and your feet are wiggling all over the place, that's the kind of sand for over 5 miles. At one point, it was so white and so wide that if you didn't look around and see the trees, you could have thought you were at the Sahara Desert. If there had been a horse, I would have got on it or asked to get on it because it was not a pleasant experience. And you would go about as far as you could see in the sand and you would make a turn and then there would be as far as you could see that sand again. 90-degree weather, no breeze, sand in your shoes, walking slow, you know, just taking the life out of you. And it certainly did take the life out of us. I was starting to get hot spots / blisters on my big toes. It was becoming worrisome. Nobody ever died of blisters. You know, buck up when I get past the berm, we'll change it. Finally, we got out of the berm section and into an aid station, and everybody was waiting. It was like a rite of passage, you know, sat down. I took my shoes off again, dumped the sand out, shook my socks out, and I was getting a blister, pretty good one on one of my big toes. So I actually had brought some tape with me, pretty thick tape, and I had some more of that lube to put on my toe afterwards. What I didn't bring was any cutting device, so I asked somebody at the aid station if they had a scissor, and they pulled out a box knife, which was a little scary because he was aiming the box knife through the tape at my ankle. But then he changed his mind, thank goodness, and was able to help me cut the tape. And so I retaped my toe, and we filled our bladders, and off we went. And we really weren't recovering. So we weren't getting back to that 13, 14, 15-minute pace. It was a struggle bus. It was starting to be a shuffle, you know, starting to walk more than we were running. You know, it's kind of when you finally give up the ghost of running, it just becomes so hard to get started. So there were a couple places where we kind of were able to pick up the pace and do a couple 16-minute miles. But it was hot. We're going through the nutrition that we had. You know, your water's hot, your drinks are hot. Things aren't tasting good. So you're trying to put in calories, but it's kind of up there in your throat a little bit. So you don't really want them, but you knew you need them. And you'd see other people, and it was kind of like you were in a filming of an episode of The Walking Dead. If you've ever seen one of those shows where the zombies just kind of plow forward, that's a lot of what we were seeing where I was in the race. And finally, Michael and I were running together, and I had been in the front before the berm, and he was in the front after the berm, and he was trying to maintain pace. And finally, we looked at each other, and he's like, I'm not sure that there's going to be much more than 30 miles for me. And I was so relieved to hear that. Because I was suffering fiercely as well. And it's like, why are you moving so fast? And he said, I thought I heard you trying to push the pace, so I was trying to push the pace. And it's like, no, for goodness sakes, just struggling back here. So we did the sentence of death, talked about quitting. We also commiserated on how hot we were, how bad we felt, how zapped we were, and we proceeded to walk slower and slower and slower, to the point that we were walking like a 26-minute per mile pace. And that, my friends, is a slow stroll. And things started to tighten up even more, felt even worse, run out of nutrition, had some gnarly left, but again, it was not tasting that good at that point. I thought the turnaround was 29 miles. Somebody came up beside me and said they thought it was 30 miles. I thought they were wrong. They were right. We come up on 29 miles, and certainly there's no aid station. And finally, we come into a clearing, which would be good. We're out of the woods, but it is in full sun in a pasture, basically walking slowly trying, well, we were just walking, who am I kidding, along this edge of this horse farm. And way out to the right around a turn was the aid station at 30 miles. And literally, we stopped and stretched every once in a while when we could find a spot of shade, trying to get just a little loose. My low back was really, really tight. My posture, I think, from kind of bending over, trying not to, looking where I was going. When I would straighten up and try to run tall, I felt better. But my low back was getting tight. I was starting to have a little bit of sciatica in my right leg. Again, my blisters were getting worse, on and on and on. You hear the story and the song coming. And we finally got to the aid station and we said, we're done. And they said, no, you're not. You're not done. You only have 20 miles to go. And we sat down and we just sat. It was just, they said, you want something to drink? And we're just sitting in the chair. And we was like, there's just no way. We a little nauseated again, took off my shoes. Blisters were popping. You could see the blisters all popped up underneath the tape, trying to figure out what to do. I actually took the needle off my bib and took the tape off and was trying to drain the blisters on my big toes to try to get some relief, thinking if I'm going to have to go back. Because we asked them, how do we get back from here if we don't run? And they said, there is no way back. And that wasn't anything good that I wanted to hear. So we're sitting there and we're just kind of staring into space, trying to cool down and underneath this, pop-up tent. And two guys come staggering in beside us, and they come under the tent and lower themselves to the ground, or lower themselves into a chair. And the one guy proceeded to take his shoes off for one of the volunteers to help him to deal with his blisters. He was actually running the 100-mile race. And I'll say shout out to Tony, if he happens to hear this podcast, because as we're having small talk between two Walking Dead people, I said, where are you from? And guess what? Tony was from Port Charlotte as well. And he said, and both of these guys live off of the same there's a big thruway in Port Charlotte called Midway Boulevard, and all three of us lived off of the same boulevard. And no way. So we sat there, and Tony got his blisters taken care of, and I was popping mine, and they were talking about a girl that they had tried to help through the berm that wasn't looking good, and finally they looked up and they saw she made it, and she said she was going to quit too. And she happened to have a crew person out there, and her crew was going to haul her back to the finish via the road, and we asked if we could hitch a ride. This is the beauty of ultra running. You make friends in the middle of misery. Everybody tries to support everybody. Everybody tries to encourage everybody. There was the volunteer, again, fixing Tony's feet. He would have worked on mine as well. But our new friend Jeannie had a crew there, and he graciously, thank you, Jim, if you ever listen to this podcast, graciously offered to haul Michael, myself, Jeannie, and yet another guy named Jim back to the start line. And so that's how our race day ended. We handed over our timing chip, tucked our tails, put our shoes on, and rode in the back of a Nissan Rogue 22 miles to the start line, apologizing to Jim, the driver, for the stench. Our justification for getting the ride back was that at 26 minutes per mile, we weren't going to finish the race until probably midnight. We had planned on finishing the race probably at 7, 8, 9 o'clock, worst case scenario. But at 26-mile pace with 20 miles, it was going to take a long time. And we wanted no part of that stroll for all that time in the dark, being miserable, being hot, being hungry. And so we decided to pull the plug. That is not one of the reasons on why I'm going to stop running. My ankle was bothering me. It was stiff. My low back bothered me. Like I said, I had to stop and stretch. Part of that probably was overheating, dehydration, just fatigue, but nothing. I wasn't having a heart attack or arrhythmia. I didn't get bit by a snake. There wasn't any lightning. I just lost my motivation. And as I've said before in podcasts, when it comes to motivation, it leaves you pretty quick. And when the motivation left, I got in the car with it. And that, my friends, I regret today as filming of this or recording of this podcast, which is 3 days after the race. I don't regret how I felt finishing and getting, or not finishing, but getting back to the start. And we actually got home just right at dark, driving back to Port Charlotte. I was sore, tired, got to see the family, happy to be in my own bed, not have to drive through the middle of the night, all those things that you're happy for early on. When you make a rash decision and the comfort food tastes so good, and those, you have all the justifications of what you're going to do right there in the moment that doesn't really have anything to do with what you plan to do right in the moment. I was concerned that if my ankle got worse and my recovery was going to be delayed because we have Cruel Jewel in 3 weeks, that I really want to be able to finish that race. It's kind of of the two, the one I really want to finish. So another justification was that if I pull the plug now, I have a better chance at recovering and finishing Cruel Jewel. What I don't know is if I could have recovered and finished Cruel Jewel. So I took that off the table, again, without much debate. My back was achy, my blisters were bad, my ankle is stiff, but I'm no worse for the wear. The question remains, had we stayed longer with our friends at mile 30 aid station and had a little bit more Coke and water and perhaps a snow cone or two, would we have come around and been able to get 6 more miles back to an aid station and then reassess and maybe 6 more? We didn't have to go through the berm, but we would be going through the woods with some little bit of technical sections in the night, which would have been good practice that we didn't ultimately get. So the happiness of the decision on Saturday led to disappointment on Sunday, Monday, and here it is Tuesday. Thoughts of has been, loser, failure all come to mind. How could I possibly talk such a good game before I start and then fall on my face when the going got tough? My dad told me once, every day is not going to be a good day. There will be losses, probably more than wins. But can I pull something out of it? What are the good things that happened? And what did I learn from it? Because for the most part, when things go perfectly, we don't learn. It's when things don't go so good and when we fail that we actually learn the best lessons. They're the hardest lessons to learn, but we learn them. I guess my biggest fear of all that is that I'm not going to learn the lesson. But I think actually Michael and I made a pact that if we're in this situation again, we will not support each other, and one person will push the other one to go at least one more aid station before we try to make somewhat of a decision like that. But nevertheless, we learned, or maybe you're learning better, some of the triggers that may lead to a poor decision. And maybe it wasn't a poor decision. Maybe it did work out okay. But right now it feels like it could have been different. The good was that it was a beautiful day in the woods. Despite being 90 degrees, the trail was beautiful, except for that berm. But the trail was beautiful. The trees were beautiful. We had, we met some really nice people. The race director was a great guy. We saw our friend Andy Matthews. We met people from Port Charlotte that we would have never met, even though we lived off of Midway together. I learned that I need to carry a better blister kit with me so I can, really take care of blisters if I need to and operate on my feet right there in the woods. I laughed a little bit this morning. My foot's a little bit red. I stuck my bibbed dirty needle in my blister and, in the middle of the sandy, dirty foot. I think I'm going to be okay. I don't think I'll get lockjaw. There wasn't any cow poop around, so I think I'm going to be okay. But nevertheless, I need a better blister routine as far as the kit I carry. The Hokas and I will have been officially divorced and will never run 50 miles together or attempt it. I am going back to my ultras. That was something good to have for the next race. The nutrition was good. We tried to take in about 80 grams of carbohydrate an hour between the gels and the gnarly. So maybe didn't get that all the time, but that came pretty close and tolerated it for the most part. I had 2 Oreos at the aid station. I had a couple peanut butter and jelly squares on top of things. Those always said good, and I had a couple cups of Coke. Our pacing early on was good. I don't think we went out too fast. I was happy with that. I feel better on the trails. I did not fall down. There were some roots, very few rocks, but some roots, and managed them okay. The little hills that we had felt good going up. Quads feel good. Muscles in my legs from the strength training were actually very good. I need to practice with the vest, so I'm going to be wearing it on my long runs more and practice my posture with it. I believe my posture was a little bit forward, so I need to make sure I'm upright, continue to work on core to, keep upright and some trap upper shoulder muscles to be able to carry that vest and stay upright. Those were all good learning things and things that we came away positive. Very grateful to Jim for the ride. Very grateful to the people that we met, the race director. It was good. Will I ever run that race again? I said flat out no Saturday. I'm not entirely sure, but that berm is something else. I just don't really have a whole lot of desire to look that thing in the eye, but who knows? Sometimes when we think of suffering, which would be minor as far as suffering compared to, this is chosen suffering, which is not really suffering, but discomfort. Sometimes we choose to get out of discomfort quick and think that we can avoid it, but discomfort always has a way of coming around the other side. So you might get rid of a little bit of discomfort early on, but you kind of pay for it in the back. It's kind of like that risk reward podcast that I did last week. There's always a risk to the selections that we make. The backside of what seems to be a good decision becomes a bad decision when you have a little time to think on it. I know in the future I'm going to try to say, how will I feel tomorrow? And again, I did say that, but I justified saying that if I get to sleep in my own bed and I'm not injured, I'll feel better tomorrow. And that was partially true, but not entirely true. So I need to sit in that, how will I feel tomorrow, a little bit better before I make an ultimate decision. I'm disappointed in myself for the decision that I made. I'm even feel even worse that I probably disappointed my coach, my mind coach, that's supposed to be able to, is trying to help me to get past some of these things. I have to have a talk with her. It's like going to the principal's office. It's not unlike when my patients come in, or members of my practice that are trying desperately to choose the right foods, but slip up and choose the wrong foods or too much. They're disappointed, and I'm disappointed that we did not make more progress. So if you're out there and you're listening to this podcast, touche. I feel your pain. We came up with a list of reasons/excuses to quit. Some of which were very valid. We were dehydrated. It was 90 degrees. It was hot. We had blisters. I mean, they seem reasonable. But in some way, it's a story. It's a story that we told ourselves to make ourselves feel better in the moment, to get us out of this discomfort zone. I have people telling me that they failed and it's just excuses for whatever they were trying to do. And again, it's a story more than, excuses seems like kind of a harsh word. Reasons may not be harsh enough, but it's a story that we start to narrate to try to talk ourselves into something. And it just goes to show you how powerful the mind is when it comes to how we feel and how we act and what we choose. We weren't the only ones. There were 83 finishers in the 50-mile and 16 people that didn't. There were 24 finishers in the 100-mile race and 8 that didn't. People took about 33 hours to finish the 100, and some people took up to 20 hours to finish the 50 mile. I congratulate each and every one of them for the effort that they put out and the perseverance, because we saw a lot of people around us that were running the 100 mile, and we shook our head thinking, they're where we are now and they've got twice as far to go. It is, hard to imagine that they could stick it out. And so congratulations to all of you who stuck it out and finished. Job well done, and very, very impressive. The beauty of running ultras is it is something we choose to do, and it's a sport that we love, and we get to get out in nature and meet new people, and there's small crowds, and you get to again actually talk to people when you're running. It's a much more laid-back community, and we have another opportunity. This was not my final ultra, and I guess sometimes you think as you're getting older, is this going to be the last event or the wheels falling off? But the reality of it is it's your choosing. It's what you choose to do, and it's not over till it's over. I've dusted off pretty good. Blisters are healing. Toenails will be falling off, but that's okay because they've grown back before. I ran 3 miles today with my dog 3-0. We didn't run fast, but we ran, not too much worse for wear. And we'll continue to try and continue to make decisions and hone in on decisions and learn from maybe doing good, and certainly learn a lot more from the mistakes that I'll make in the future. So if you're struggling and have episodes of perhaps the wheels falling off or falling off the wagon or being on the struggle bus, you're not alone. It happens to all of us. Nobody's perfect, but when you get in the game, that's so much better than the person that never got in the game. And you'll never know till you try. And again, as long as we have the opportunity to dust ourselves off and get up and try again, why not try? If you'd like some help, go on over to drdulaney.com, DoctorDulaney. Love to help you in our practice with your nutrition, overall health, both from a cardiac standpoint and a general health and wellness standpoint. Certainly we've been there, done that, and we're willing to work with people. No judgment here. We want the best for our patients, and we'll be your biggest cheerleader. Thank you as always for listening. I'll be back next week with an update on training for the Cruel Jewel 50 mile. Thanks for listening.